The call sign that made Navy SEALs salute a fighter pilot. The Admiral rejected.
The aircraft carrier was loud. It was always loud, engines screaming, deck crews shouting, jets roaring off the runway into open sky. But inside the Admiral's briefing room, it was silent. Not respectful silence, not calm silence, tense silence. The kind that stretches thin before it snaps. At the front of the room stood a fighter pilot in a flight suit still smelling of jet fuel. Helmet tucked under one arm, visor scratched, name tag partially burned from something that clearly hadn't gone according to plan. Across from him sat a row of Navy SEALs, battle, hardened, quiet, watching. At the head of the table, an admiral folded his hands. Cold eyes, controlled voice. You disobeyed a direct order. The admiral said flatly. The pilot didn't respond immediately. He stood straight, calm. Outside the metal walls of the carrier, the ocean stretched endlessly, but inside this room the air felt tight. You were told to abort, the admiral continued. Instead, you broke formation, entered restricted airspace, and risked an international incident. The pilot's jaw tightened slightly. Yes, sir, no excuses, no explanations, just acknowledgement. One of the SEALs shifted in his seat. Because they knew exactly what had happened in that valley 2 nights ago. Intel had gone bad. Extraction had gone worse. And a SEAL team had been pinned down behind enemy lines with no air cover approved. The mission was classified. Officially, no aircraft had been cleared to engage. Officially, that valley was a no-fly zone. Officially, those SEALs were on their own. The admiral's voice hardened. You were not authorized to engage. The pilot finally lifted his eyes. Sir, with respect, they were about to be overrun. Silence again. One of the SEALs at the table leaned forward slightly. His knuckles were scarred, fresh bandages wrapped around 2 fingers. They were already taking fire. The pilot continued. Heavy fire. The admiral's gaze sharpened, and yet you chose to ignore command. The pilot didn't blink. I chose to ignore the clock, sir. A subtle shift in the room, because everyone knew what that meant. Time on target had expired, fuel margins were tight, backup was 20 minutes out, and 20 minutes in a kill zone might as well be a lifetime. The admiral's expression didn't change. You were given a call sign for this deployment, he said calmly. Standard issue, temporary. The pilot nodded, yes, sir. But after that stunt, the admiral continued, that call sign is revoked. The room went still. Revoking a call sign wasn't just paperwork. It was reputation, identity, erased. The pilot absorbed it without reaction. But then one of the SEALs stood up. Chairs scraped the floor. The admiral's eyes narrowed. Sit down, Chief. The SEAL didn't move. With respect, Admiral, he said steadily, that pilot has a new call sign. The room froze. The admiral's tone dropped. This is not your place. The SEAL looked toward the pilot, then back at the admiral. Sir, when our comms went dark, when we were down to our last magazine, we heard one thing over the radio. He paused. Even the hum of the carrier seemed quieter. He checked in. The SEAL's voice lowered, and he didn't give his assigned call sign. Now the admiral was listening. What did he say? He asked. The SEAL's eyes locked onto the pilot. He said, this is Guardian Actual. I've got your 6. The room shifted. Because that wasn't a standard call sign, that wasn't issued, that wasn't approved, and every SEAL at that table slowly rose to their feet. Not loud, not dramatic, just deliberate, one by one, and they saluted. The admiral's face tightened. Because he understood something now. The call sign he had just revoked wasn't the one that mattered. And the name the pilot had chosen for himself in that valley was already spreading across the fleet. 2 nights earlier, the valley had been nothing but dust and silence, high cliffs, narrow escape routes. No friendly air support cleared inside its grid. The SEAL team had moved in under darkness, fast and precise. Intel said the compound held a high value courier, grab, extract, disappear before sunrise, clean, controlled. Simple, but war doesn't respect plans. Halfway through exfiltration, the first explosion hit. an IED buried along the northern ridge. The blast echoed like thunder between the cliffs. Then came the gunfire, from above, from both sides. Perfectly positioned, it wasn't an ambush, it was a trap. The SEAL team dove for cover behind fractured stone walls as tracer rounds sliced through the night. Radio chatter exploded through their headsets. Contact left, a 2 o'clock high, man down. Their comms officer tried to reach command. Static, then fragments of response. Air support denied. Restricted airspace. Political clearance pending. Pending in a kill zone. Pending means nothing. Rounds cracked against rock inches from helmets. One operator took a hit to the shoulder. Another's rifle jammed under debris. Minutes stretched into something heavier. A slow realization they weren't getting help. Above the valley, miles away, a single fighter jet cut through the night sky. The pilot inside had heard the fragmented distress call before command silenced the channel. He checked the coordinates. He saw the grid. Restricted, no fly. Violation meant career, ending consequences. International escalation. Court-martial if it went wrong. He switched frequencies. Command, this is Viper 2-1, requesting clearance to engage hostile fire in grid Echo 7. The response came sharp. Negative, maintain current vector. Do not enter restricted airspace. Below, another explosion. The pilot's jaw tightened. Fuel was tight. His window was closing. He could turn back, follow orders. Live with it. Instead, he rolled the jet hard left. Afterburners ignited. Warning alarms blinked across his console as he crossed into the forbidden grid. In the valley, the SEAL team had begun counting magazines. 2 left, 1 left. The enemy was closing in from the ridge. And then a roar, low, violent, unmistakable. Every SEAL looked up as a shadow tore across the sky. Enemy fighters paused. Confused, the radio crackled to life. Calm, controlled, this is Guardian Actual, I've got your 6. The first pass was surgical. Precision. Guided munitions slammed into the ridgeline gun nests. The cliffs lit up like daylight. Shockwaves ripped through enemy positions. The second pass was closer, danger close. So close the SEALs felt the heat of the blast roll over their backs as they hugged the dirt. Enemy fire broke. Panic spread. The trap collapsed. Above, the pilot ignored every warning flashing red across his console. Fuel low. Airspace violation confirmed. Return immediately. He made one final strafing run, clearing the eastern ridge long enough for the SEALs to move. Extract window open. He transmitted calmly. Below, the team moved fast, wounded carried, weapons up. They reached the exfil point with seconds to spare before enemy reinforcements arrived. As helicopters finally crossed into range, the fighter jet pulled up sharply, climbing back into sanctioned airspace like nothing had happened. But something had happened, fuel indicators blinking critical, career on the line, orders broken, lives saved. Back in the present, inside the carrier's briefing room, the SEAL chief's voice cut through the silence. He wasn't cleared, the chief said firmly, but he was there. The Admiral said nothing, because everyone in that room now understood something undeniable. That valley would have been a memorial site. Instead, it became a legend, and the man who broke formation. He didn't fly in as Viper 2-1, he left as something else, something the fleet had already started whispering. Guardian Actual. Back inside the carrier's briefing room, the air felt heavier than before. The story of the valley no longer needed to be told. Everyone in that room had lived it. The SEAL chief remained standing. The other operators beside him stood silent, arms at their sides, not in protest, not in defiance. In respect. At the head of the table, the Admiral's fingers were still folded, controlled, measured. But his mind was turning, you understand. The Admiral said slowly that discipline is what holds the Navy together. No one disagreed. Orders existed for a reason. Airspace restrictions existed for a reason. Political consequences were real. One wrong move at that altitude, and the headlines wouldn't read heroes. they'd read International Incident. The pilot still stood at attention. Flight suit marked with dust from that night, helmet under his arm. He hadn't asked for recognition. Hadn't defended himself, he'd simply answered questions. "Yes, sir," the pilot said calmly. "I understand." The Admiral's eyes sharpened. "And yet you ignored a direct command." A pause. Then the pilot spoke again, steady, respectful. "Yes, sir." No justification. No emotional speech. Just truth. The Admiral leaned back slightly. "Do you know what happens when officers decide which orders to follow?" The room remained silent. Chaos, breakdown, loss of control. That was the fear. But then the SEAL chief finally spoke again. "With respect, Admiral," he said carefully, "if he hadn't decided, we wouldn't be here." The words weren't dramatic. They were factual. The Admiral's gaze moved across the line of operators. Each one scarred, each one still breathing because a pilot had crossed a line on a map. The Admiral exhaled slowly. "Guardian Actual," he repeated quietly. The name sounded different now. He looked at the pilot. "That was not your assigned call sign." "No, sir." "Why choose it?" For the first time, the pilot hesitated. Not from fear, from memory. "My father was Navy," he said finally. "Rescue swimmer." His call sign was Guardian. A subtle shift in the room, he used to say. The pilot continued, "Your job isn't just to follow the mission, it's to bring people home." The Admiral studied him carefully. "And you believed that meant ignoring orders?" The pilot's answer was simple. "I believed it meant they weren't expendable." Silence fell again. The Admiral stood, slowly, the kind of movement that carries weight. He walked toward the large window overlooking the flight deck, watching another jet launch into the sky. Orders kept structure. Structure prevented wars from spiraling. But sometimes, structure asked men to stand down while others died. Behind him, the SEALs remained standing, not demanding, not challenging, just waiting. The Admiral turned back. "You put this carrier, this fleet, and this command at risk." "Yes, sir." "You violated protocol." "Yes, sir." "And you disobeyed me." A beat. "Yes, sir." The Admiral's voice lowered. "But you brought them home." The words settled like gravity. And in that moment, the room understood something critical. This wasn't just about discipline anymore. It was about legacy, about what kind of Navy they chose to be, one that followed orders to the letter, or one that remembered why those orders existed in the first place. The Admiral looked directly at the pilot. "The board will review your actions," he said firmly. Then his gaze shifted to the SEAL team, "and I suspect they will have input." The SEAL chief gave a small nod. Because this wasn't over. The fate of a fighter pilot now rested between regulation and respect. And sometimes those two don't align. 3 days later, the carrier's hangar deck was quiet. Not silent, never silent, but subdued. Rows of sailors stood at ease. Officers lined the perimeter. Word had spread quickly across the ship. The review board had met. The findings were in. At the center of the hangar stood the fighter pilot. No helmet this time, no jet fuel on his suit. Just a man waiting for the consequences of a decision made in 12 seconds over a hostile valley. At the far end, the Admiral approached, his expression unreadable. The sea wind moved through the open hangar doors, carrying the scent of salt and steel. The Admiral stopped in front of the pilot. A folded document rested in his hand. "Lieutenant." He began, voice steady, carrying across the deck. "You violated restricted airspace, disobeyed a direct command, and engaged without authorization." Every sailor listening felt the weight of those words. The pilot stood firm. "Yes, sir." The Admiral continued. "Under normal circumstances, that would end a career." A ripple of tension moved through the crowd. But the Admiral wasn't finished. However, he said, unfolding the document slowly, "The board has also determined that your actions directly prevented the loss of a classified special operations unit." He paused. "And then, including a Navy SEAL team whose testimony was unanimous." A shift in posture among the gathered operators standing to one side. The Admiral stepped closer. "You exercise judgment under fire. You accepted personal risk to protect American lives. He looked the pilot directly in the eye. That is not insubordination, a breath, that is leadership. The hangar felt lighter. The Admiral held up the paper. Formal reprimand is hereby suspended. A murmur moved through the sailors, but the Admiral raised a hand, silencing it. As for your call sign, he paused deliberately. The Navy does not officially recognize unauthorized designations. A few hearts dropped. Then, but some names, the Admiral continued, are not given by command. His gaze shifted to the SEAL team. They are earned. The SEAL chief stepped forward first. No words, no speech. He stopped in front of the pilot and saluted, sharp, precise, respectful. One by one, the other SEALs followed. The sound of boots shifting echoed softly across steel flooring. It wasn't ceremonial, it wasn't ordered, it was chosen. The pilot's throat tightened slightly. He returned the salute. Not as Viper 2-1, not as a man who broke protocol, but as the name that had crossed that radio in the valley. Guardian Actual. The Admiral watched the exchange carefully. Then, after a brief moment, he saluted too. Not long, not dramatic, but enough to make it clear. Some rules maintain order, but some decisions define who you are. The wind moved again through the hangar doors as jets roared in the distance. The pilot stepped back into formation. Career intact, reputation transformed, and across the fleet the story spread quietly about the call sign that wasn't assigned, the mission that wasn't cleared, and the fighter pilot the Admiral almost rejected until the men he saved stood up for him. Because in the end, call signs aren't paperwork, they're promises, and Guardian Actual had kept his.